I am not going to fight for my life. I have lost everything that I thought was valuable and nobody will love me. If I'm not beautiful, nobody will love me. That's what I thought. And they showed me what showing up looks like. But when I replanted myself in the world and wanted to be a light and not somebody that took, but somebody that gave, I really found joy. And there's such a difference between happiness and joy. I felt worthless. And I thought, truly, if I take myself out of this equation, my husband will find another wife. My kids it will be better for them. To have constant attention, wow, this serving thing, it matters. And that ultimately rebuilt my self-esteem.
We have for you today an incredible guest. I could be celebrating with you right now that she is a best-selling author, but I'm not going to brag on her. I could be celebrating with you right now that there's a film coming out about her life, but I don't want her to get a big head. I could be celebrating with you right now that she is a supermodel. She's worked with Victoria's Secret. She's walked some of the finest runways in the world. But again, I don't want her to get a big head. Here's what you need to know about today's guest. In being diagnosed with cancer, in experiencing the hardship of the treatment, and losing her hair, and ultimately losing her breast, she realized ultimately what mattered most in life. She's going to be sharing with you part of that journey today. It's an emotional one. It's a empowering one. And it's one ultimately, as we get to the end of it, that is not about her, but it's about you. It's not about her life, but yours. You're going to love it. So buckle up, get ready for the ride as I bring on my friend and soon to be yours. Her name is Christine Handy. Christine Handy, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
Hi, John. Nice to meet you.
Well, I don't feel like we're meeting. I feel like we're friends. We just haven't actually shaken hands quite yet, but now we have. Now we've hugged. Now we know each other a little bit better. For those who don't yet know you the way I feel like I do, if you were to introduce yourself to them and you said, my name is Christine, what would you follow with?
I usually say I'm the cancer disruptor, but that embodies just a plethora of things. I think I would be known as a courageous person because I very vulnerably talk about my story all the time, to ad nauseum to some people, I suppose. I've been a model my whole life since I was 11 years old. And ironically, I'm still doing it, but differently now. I'm doing it because I did lose my chest to breast cancer, and I'm modeling now with a concave chest to show women that my beauty was never dissected because I lost my chest. My beauty has always been an inside job, as is everybody else's. But sometimes we get lost in society's way of determining other people's beauty or value, which sometimes we can get caught in. And I did get caught in that for a while, but I'm really just a voice of hope. I call myself a facilitator of hope. And I have a book called Walk Beside Me, which is about my journey, and which also just got recently made into a movie called Hello, Beautiful.
Well, so sometimes when I ask people to introduce themselves, they give the kind of introduction that would have people running for the exit. I think yours is the kind of introduction that has them grabbing a seat, pulling it up close and saying, tell me more, tell me more. So I'll ask on behalf of them, tell me more. So Christine, we're going to back away from Miami and back away from the catwalk and the cameras and the film and everything else. I'm going to bring you back home. I don't have the honor of interviewing many people from St. Louis, Missouri. It's my home base, but it also was yours. You grew up in St. Louis.
I did. I have not lived there in a very long time. I left St. Louis to go to SMU and never did move back. But I love St. Louis. It's a town that built this root inside of me. And I feel like when you meet people around the country, at least when I meet people around the country, you always know who a Midwesterner is. And there's this different kind of silent humility about Midwesterners that I always gravitate towards. And I think that my foundation is certainly based on my upbringing in St. Louis.
Growing up, what did you imagine doing as you grew older?
Well, because I started modeling so young, I don't know what I grew up thinking I would be other than just that. Like I just thought I'd continue to model until I was married and had kids. And then all of a sudden I started to get ill when I was married with kids and ultimately went back to modeling. And here I am.
You started modeling when you were 11. You have a bunch of sisters, and apparently you wanted to model even before you were 11. I mean, that's wild. So I have a sister named Katie. You may know her. Katie wanted to be a singer, and she sang from the time she was a baby all the way through. She's still singing, and she's still not doing it professionally, and she never will. So Katie had this wild dream of singing. You had this wild dream of modeling, and you did it. So at what age did you recognize, I want to do this? It is a career path, and somehow I'm anointed for this kind of work.
I don't know really what was going on inside my head other than I wanted to do something different. I wanted to make my own mark in the family system and the community that I was in. And I had a lot of grit and grace at the time. I also really wanted to make my own money. I wanted to have my own little bank account at 11. And I want, because when you're at 11 and you make a paycheck, they don't hand you a paycheck, it goes into a savings account. I don't know if that's different now. So I really just wanted to have my own little money and be independent and make my own mark.
What was your first modeling gig?
I can't remember the very first one, but I did a lot for the Cardinals. I did a lot in the newspaper. I did a lot of billboards. St. Louis is not a huge market for modeling, but I did Dillard's and Nordstrom and Pepsi was in St. Louis at the time, and J.C. Penney did some work in St. Louis.
I know you did a lot of J.C. Penney. Eventually, though, you leave the runways here in St. Louis and you expand your horizons a little bit. Why'd you choose SMU?
Well, I applied to way too many schools. I think it was a thing at the time, but I applied to 9 schools and SMU was my safety. But my dad was doing business at the time in Dallas and he really encouraged me to go there because he could check in on me. And so ultimately I decided to go there. And it was a really pretty campus and really, I went on a great weekend to visit and the weather was great. And I was like, I think I like this town.
I mean, and for those who've never been in fact, rather than me describing it, you actually went there. Why don't you describe SMU to those who have never walked the campus?
Well, it's beautiful. It's very manicured. The buildings are, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a mini Washington University and it's so pristine. And I don't even recall ever seeing trash anywhere. And it's in this big city. So it's urban as well. But also you have like beautiful people. And I'll never forget when I got there, they said that the freshman parking lot was like, had more expensive cars than any parking lot in the country. It sounded crazy. It sounded crazy to me. But when I looked around, there were just Porsche and Mercedes and just really materialistic things, which sounds just so silly, but that's kind of the environment.
So that was the environment. What's the drawback from that? Because this is part of your story now, and it takes hold of your heart early. This drive to fit in and elevate societally.
Well, it's funny because I always fell back on modeling. Even after I graduated from college, I still wasn't sure what I would do. So I went back to work. I went back to modeling. And at SMU, one of the first communities that I plugged into was called Mademoiselles, and it's the SMU models. So I think I was Miss February in the SMU calendar. So the foundation for me, it felt safe to be in front of a camera. It felt comfortable to be a model because that's all I knew. Right. And so whether that's right or wrong or whether people think it's right or wrong doesn't really matter. That's where I felt comfortable and that's where I felt like I should be. That was kind of my home away from home. And so when I went out into the world and went to SMU, well, what did I pick? Looking back, it's so easy to dissect, right? I picked a place, the community that I picked was the modeling community on campus because I felt uprooted from my hometown. And so you pick places that feel comfortable. And so again, after I graduated from college, you feel kind of uncertain and I wasn't sure what I would do. What did I do? I leaned back into the space that I knew. So I was heavily invested in the modeling space and pretty much everything external, right? Because you get hired for what you look like. You don't get hired for your brains or for your grades.
Was that hard then for you that when you get hired, it's proof that you're enough, but all the times you don't get hired, it's also proof that you're not?
Well, and typically, at least back then, and now it's different. Back then, I would probably say I would go on out of 10 go-sees when you take your portfolio to a client, I probably would get 3 out of 10. And that seemed pretty normal. And it's also a very divisive, well, it was back then, culture because you're competing against, I wasn't competing against a brunette. I was competing against a blonde. So you weren't really good friends with the other blondes. You were good friends with the brunettes because typically, I don't know, people don't know this. Typically, if you're on a photo shoot, at least again, back then, There's a brunette, there's African American, there's a blonde, and so on, kind of is that order. And so you became very good friends with people you were on set with. Well, I was never on set with other blondes.
You do this at J.C. Penney, you do it at Guess, J. Crew, Pepsi, Bud Light. Was there, looking back on it, a shoot where you're like, man, it just was so much fun. Here we were doing this shoot with these people, this look. Give me a description of one of the shots.
Yeah, I traveled ultimately I traveled after college and I went to Barcelona and worked for Elite Worldwide. And I lived in the Elite modeling agency for a very short time because I got very homesick and came home. But that was an incredible experience, to be hired by somebody outside of the country. But also when I was in college, I would go on these shoots in Mexico City. And the brands, the vendors would bring you and several other models on a private plane to Mexico City. You do your job and they'd fly you back. So we felt like we were pretty big deals, and we really weren't, but we thought that.
So back then, because at age 35, your life is going to change and begin changing in a profound manner. What was your true north back then? What were you striving to do? What was the core of your life?
It's not a very flattering answer. I'll preface that. But I cared about what other people thought of me. I cared about what I looked like. I cared about what I looked like when I walked out of my house. So even if I was trying to look messy, it took me an hour to look very messy. I worked out a lot. And my friends would say to me, you should come to this Bible study. And I would say to them, no, I have a yoga class or I have this workout class. And I was dedicated to my body, but not because I was trying to be so healthy. I was trying to be fit and look good. And that was really my measure. And it was society's measure of me at the time.
And then society and you begin to change when at 35, you start feeling some changes in your body. Would you talk about that?
Yeah. So I had a colon surgery when I was 35. It was it was an emergency in a sense, but it wasn't like I was rushed to the hospital. I had a few days to find a doctor and to pick the surgeon. And I went in, actually, again, a lot of my story isn't flattering, but it's very honest. I went in with my portfolio. I literally said to the surgeon, I'm a lingerie and bathing suit model. I don't want a big scar. Can you do this laparoscopically? And he was like, sure, no problem. And it was almost like I was so insecure about it, I had to bring the pictures in, right? Which goes to show, where my head was at the time. So I go have the surgery and I wake up in the recovery room and I have a port in my neck. I didn't even know what a port was.
Yeah.
I have a blood bag over my head and I'm in this grotesque pain. And I reach down towards my abdomen and I can feel that I'm cut wide open and I'm touching staples that, are from hip to hip. And I'm panicking. Like, what happened? It was nothing funny about it. And I asked the nurse who was sitting next to me because my blood pressure was so low. And I kind of garbled some words together to say kind of what happened. I could barely speak. And she said, she kind of got cross with me and she said, well, your doctor will be in shortly. She wouldn't even tell me. And apparently he nicked a vein in one of my bones and I almost bled to death on the table. And part of the reason I almost bled to death was because he was trying to salvage what had happened inside of me without opening me up because I had said to him, this is my profession. Please don't open me up. Let's do this laparoscopically. So I kind of set him up to, well, it was an accident.
You lost a third of your colon.
Mm-hmm.
You lost, in your mind at least, at first, the physical beauty, man. You have this big scar trapped across your stomach now. How did that affect not only what you did professionally, but how did that affect the way you looked in the mirror and saw yourself?
Well, you would think at that time I was old enough to have realized, wow, if this is really affecting my self-esteem, then I have to really do some introspective work and figure out why a scar is causing so much emotional pain in my life. Well, of course, I didn't do any introspective work. I just wanted the scar to heal really well, which it did, and I went back to work. So I did none of the emotional work. Okay. I just skipped right over it.
Well, you're going to get other opportunities in the near future to do that work. In 2011, seems like a minor issue. You tear a ligament in your wrist.
Yes, that's maybe the most difficult part of my story because that was preventable. Not the injury, but what happened after. I tear a ligament in my right wrist, which is not that big of a deal. I searched for a good doctor. I found a doctor that I thought was the best doctor. If you know the Dallas Mavericks team, it was their surgeon, orthopedic surgeon, and highly recommended. So I went to this doctor and he repaired the ligament. And 6 weeks after the cast was on, they took off the cast and I started to do a little physical therapy. And then my arm literally ballooned. My wrist looked like my thigh bone. And so that's a clear red flag. Something's wrong. Danger, danger, danger. Well, the doctor, the highly recommended doctor, missed a lot of the red flags. Ultimately, it's a very long story, but almost a year into this, I went to see another doctor. Again, going back to the self-esteem, I felt like, people would tell me, they'd say, go see a second opinion. I'd be like, nope, my doctor's the best. I'm good. He's telling me that this is RSD, which is basically your brain is telling your limb that there's pain and trauma, but there's really not. I believe him. I trust him. I don't want to see a second opinion. Ultimately, I did see a second opinion and I had an infection dated back to the original surgery. And it was misdiagnosed and ignored. And ultimately, I have a fully fused arm that was reconstructed by an amazing doctor in New York who felt such sadness that this happened to me. And it's reconstructed with cadaver bones and a cadaver Achilles tendon that was placed in there to kind of cushion the pain of really my future because I'm in chronic pain from that debacle.
So you're in chronic pain. You're also opening yourself up for more scars. And yet, even still, it's not really changing what you ultimately are resting your life on and moving toward. Am I kind of following the progression?
Yeah, I mean that one really hurt because I kind of lost faith in the medical system. I lost faith in the doctor for sure. And I was starting to question obviously what I was focused on. I started to question what my future was going to look like, not because of the scars, but if I was really focusing on things that kept getting disrupted or things that could be taken away, then I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing, but I was confused. There was a lot of confusion in my life.
Hmm. It's about to get more confusing. What
Yes.
happens next?
So I'm in New York City. I found this amazing doctor who's kind of treating me with a lot of respect, which I did not have from the previous doctor. And for the whole year that I'm trying to deal with casts on my arm, when I'm showering, I'm putting my arm with the cast outside of the shower. And I'm essentially pouring liquid soap over my shoulder to wash my body because I can't really wash my body. So I'm in this hotel in New York City and I take this bar of soap because there's no liquid soap. And I take this bar of soap and I brush it over my left breast and I feel a lump. And I thought, there's absolutely no way I have anything wrong. I have no family history of breast cancer. I'm a healthy woman other than this infection, and I'm allergic to sugar. I eat healthy. I work out all the time. You name it. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I do the right things. And I ultimately, 5 days later, I was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of breast cancer.
So I've never had the diagnosis of cancer. I've been through a whole bunch of other things physically and emotionally, but I've never sat across from someone who said the words, it's cancer.
Yeah.
When you heard those words, what is that like?
Well, I think for me, okay, I knew I was about to lose my hair, and I knew that my identity that was tethered to so many things that were out of my control was now crumbling, right? My identity was now getting taken away, which again wasn't a healthy identity. But my self-esteem was so low at that point that I really just thought, okay, I'm done. I am not going to fight for my life. I have lost everything that I thought was valuable and nobody will love me.
Wow.
If
I
I'm
mean, at
not
this point, you're married with two children.
if I'm not beautiful, nobody will love me. That's what I thought.
Even with your family.
Yes.
How long were you living with that as a whisper in the back of your mind?
Too long. Well, what happened was quite literally a miracle. My friends essentially understood what was happening. They essentially understood that there was some lacking maybe inside of my house and also some self-esteem issues with me. And they really showed up every day, not only for the arm and the colon, but now they said to me, okay, we are not going to Bible study because you're our Bible study. We're going to show up every day. We've got a list of people. We have a Monday girl that's going to come at 8 o'clock and leave at 5. We have a Tuesday girl. They went through the whole week. And every single day of the week, I was covered with somebody to take care of me, essentially a babysitter. And they showed me what showing up looks like. And what they taught me was that if they were showing up in my life, why wasn't I showing up for my life? And I was really questioning everything that I had coveted up to that point. All the false idols in my life were being stripped away. And I was saying to myself, okay, well, if all of this was wrong to covet, materialism, external things, external beauty, and if that's really not what matters in life, and that's not really what my value is, what is my value? And so I started to really pour into faith, and I started to really pour into, finding out what tenets that I wanted to have in my life moving forward. And what I realized was these women, they were serving me, and the end result was to show sisterhood and showing up for people. And ultimately, what it led me to do was to serve. After my diagnosis was complete, after all of my surgeries, after all of my chemotherapies, I essentially devoted my life to serving other people and to sharing hope in the world. And it took all of that kind of grinding of my character, or who knows? I mean, maybe that's who I was really, that 11-year-old girl. Maybe that's who I really was back then, but it gotten so twisted. And I'm not blaming it on the modeling industry. I still am in the industry. I'm not blaming it on society. I just got confused for a very long time. But when I replanted myself in the world and wanted to be a light and not somebody that took, but somebody that gave, I really found joy. And there's such a difference between happiness and joy. I mean, and I had been happy in my life. The modeling jobs were fun. They did bring me happiness, but they didn't bring me joy. And when I give hope to people and when I share my story and I talk about courage and I talk about survivorship and that joy that I get from that and the joy that people feel, that's the light of the world. That's my substance. That's my focus now.
I've heard you say in the past there were 88 women who stood by my side, at least.
There's probably more, but yeah, I mean, that's a ton. And it's almost like I feel like there was such purpose in all of that. The pain was so great. And it's not like my story was different than other people's. It took me longer to get where I needed to be.
So I'm curious, you mentioned several different times in several different ways that I was a taker. My focus was on the wrong things. I got swept up by society. What was it about this girl whose focus was on the wrong thing? She was a taker. She got swept up by society that these 88 angels and more saw beauty in, real beauty, not magazine cover girl type beauty, but real beauty, that they would sit at your side from 8 to 5 rather than live their life. So what did they see in you that you did not yet see in yourself?
Well, my character was deep down inside, right? I mean, our souls are who we are. And sometimes it gets confusing and sometimes we just have to go back to that source. And so the kind of the grinding of the illnesses that I went through brought me down to nothing. And when you're down to nothing, you realize what really matters in life. And when I was realizing that all the facades that had been stripped away didn't ever bring me happiness. Like my blonde hair no longer kept me warm at night. Well, what was keeping me warm? It was love. It was commitment. It was people. And when I realized those things, I realized that, yes, I did have good character inside. It took me a while to find it back. And so by them saying to me, we do care about you and we're going to give up our own families, our own resources, our own time to take care of yours during this trial. And if it goes on for a long time, it's not transactional. We don't need you to do something for us because we're doing something for you.
Right.
I think so much of our world is very transactional. And when I was done with my chemotherapy, I said, I'm never doing anything transactional again, ever. If somebody asks me for a favor, I'm not going to say, well, since you asked me for a favor, I want something back. I don't want anything back. I just want to serve.
28 rounds of chemo.
Yeah.
12 surgeries. I think double mastectomy. In addition to your friends, what kept you going during this agonizing time?
Well, for sure, faith, for sure, God. I rebuilt, it's funny how what we listen to and even our own voice, right? We can tell ourselves all day, you're not worthy, you're not lovable, you're not beautiful, you're not worth people's time, whatever these horrible things that we can tell ourselves. Or we can say, I'm a child of God.
Right.
I am beautiful because I'm made in God's image. Those are two different scenarios. And I'm going to believe either one of them. It depends on what you say to yourself. And so if I retrain my voice to say you're a champion, God is good and you're good and you're worthy of people's time and attention. If I meditate on that, then I'm going to start believing that. But it takes a long time to start believing things that you haven't nurtured inside yourself for a long time. And I want to measure beyond that. I decided that I was going to get rid of kindly and gently the people in my life that were taking me down, pushing me down, or leading me in directions that were not healthy. And once you do that, so now you've changed your own voice and you changed what you're listening to. I focused on faith-based music. And so that's what I listened to. I focused on different films and different TV shows and different things that I was watching. I only follow people online that are, hope facilitators as well. They're not showing the materialism of the world because I no longer care about that. Yeah. So if you shift, right, but really shift in all those areas, then you're unstoppable. Yeah. Because every voice you listen to is a voice of light, of faith, of hope.
Was there a specific moment when it flipped for you? You whispered, but I'll make it a little bit more of a roar, that you weren't sure you wanted to live. And specifically, you had a date and a plan to take your own life. Like this wasn't something you were struggling with. It was something you almost knew to be true. Like you did not necessarily want to live through this thing. Was there a moment when you recognized, you know what? Yes, I do. And it is on. I'm all in.
Well, I mean, we talk about these things so quickly. We talk about getting a diagnosis. We talk about having a third of your colon removed. We talk about having your arm fused. There's physical pain. There's emotional pain. There's trauma. There's duress. There's all of these things that we don't, right, talk about in an hour podcast. But by the time I was diagnosed with cancer, I wasn't taking care of my kids because I was trying to figure out how to live a life with a fused right arm, how to drive a car, how to pick up a pan because my doctor said I would never carry anything over 2 pounds. I had to move the toilet paper to another side. There's things that we don't talk about. And you get to a point where you're like, okay, you have cancer now and we can't start your chemotherapy because it will destroy the grafts in your arm that they just used to rebuild your arm. And I was like, forget it. I am a mother, then I can't take care of my children. I'm a wife and my husband doesn't even know who I am because I can't take care of myself or him. I can't remember the last time I cooked a meal for my family. So you feel it wasn't just a bad self-esteem. I was losing the jobs that I wanted so badly. I wanted to be a wife. I wanted to be a mother. And I couldn't perform those duties at all. And so I was like, okay, I could already not perform those duties. And I'm about to go through 28 rounds of chemotherapy and put my kids out and put my family out and not show up at my kids' games and not go visit my son in school. I felt worthless. And I thought, truly, if I take myself out of this equation, my husband will find another wife. My kids it will be better for them to have constant attention. How's your mom doing? It was their attention to have, not mine. And so I was so distraught over taking so much out of my kids' life that I thought I'm going to take myself out of this equation and it's going to be better for them. Again, it's a distorted thought. It's a distorted perception, but that's how I felt. And it was when I started to talk about really taking myself out of the equation where my friends were like, oh no, oh no, 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 because you're distorted. And this is how it sounds to us. And when you get through your chemotherapy and when you survive this, you're going to have a story to tell. And it is your job to be here to talk about it. The other thing they taught me was, it wasn't a sacrifice for them to show up for me. It wasn't a sacrifice for my family. It was a privilege. And I couldn't figure that out. But eventually, a couple months into this chemo thing, I was like, you know what? when I was bringing stuff for the nurses in the chemo ward, when I was helping other people who were sitting next to me who just lost their hair, it was a privilege to serve. It was a privilege to help other people. And I finally figured that out. And it was like a clock just like clicked. Wow, this serving thing, it matters. And that ultimately rebuilt my self esteem.
So I've written down a bunch of the quotes that you've shared, either in your book or just through podcast interviews, talks that you've given. Here's one of them. And I'd like you to speak to this quote from those who don't necessarily agree with it. Okay, so here's a quote from you. It took my friends to teach me that not only was life worth living, but that they and that God would never forsake me. For those right now listening to our conversation who don't have that group of angel-like friends who sit with them and they don't have that strong, enduring faith in God who will never forsake them, what's your encouragement to them?
Well, I depended on things that were outside of me. I depended on things that were not focused on God, and it got me nowhere. I was lonely. My self-esteem was corrupted. And when I did finally just say to God, okay, I'm down to nothing, rebuild me, he rebuilt me in a way that gave me courage. Life is lonely. You know, we all go through illnesses and things that we feel very alone going through. Well, if you add God to that, you don't really go through anything alone. So I would encourage you to investigate what that feels like, because I feel completely different and I feel whole now.
How has what you define as beauty or perfect changed since your diagnosis and continued recovery?
Well, I actually, this goes back to the mastectomies and the implants. I actually reconstructed my chest with implants, and I had maybe 6 or 7 reconstructive surgeries. I mean, I wanted them to look like normal and just like I had. And in 2020, I had breast implant illness and a MRSA infection, which almost took my life. And then I woke up in a hospital, and during COVID, when nobody could be in the hospital, I had no friends, no family. I had to put my phone in a locker. And I woke up from surgery. And again, I felt down in the recovery room, and I felt this vacant chest. And I never had a vacant chest when I was going through breast cancer, because I had immediately had implants. And I was like, this feels really bad. I mean, it felt really, really scary to me. And it was months after the physical pain went away that I would get tons of messages from all over the world, because at that point I had a presence on social media. And these women would tell me their stories of how they were afraid to show it to their husbands.
Yeah.
And how they're afraid not to put on a prosthetic. And my heart kept breaking over and over again. I was like, this is wrong. So I called my modeling agency and I was like, I'm coming back to work. And they were like, oh, cute, cute. And I was like, we had better come in and show you. So I went in and showed them. And they were like, yeah, I don't think so. We don't see your vision. I was like, okay, that's fine. So I called my manager who lived in New York and I said, you got to get me into New York Fashion Week. And she goes, okay, why? And I said, I'm going back. I want to come back to work. Ultimately, it worked. I got on in New York Fashion Week. I partnered with Victoria's Secret as a breastless model for them. I've worked with lingerie brands. I've worked with bathing suit brands. I've walked in Miami Swim Week with the largest bathing suit brands with a concave chest, because I want women to see my courage, because they can borrow my courage. Maybe those women who wouldn't show it to their husbands say, you know what? I feel fine. Look at Christine Handy, who's 50 some odd years old, walking in Miami Swim Week in a bathing suit with these 17-year-olds, and she doesn't have a chest. So I decided to go out and lend my courage to people, and it made a big splash, and I'm so happy I did it. Not only did it help other people, but it also kept me encouraged through my own journey, and it kept me encouraged through my own trials with losing my chest again.
Gosh, there's so much there. My first question is, how did it feel getting ready to take that first walk on a runway where you are so vulnerable in front of the people and cameras and judgments? And then how did it feel afterwards?
Well, I'll give you a little backstory. I've actually only been a print model my whole life. So for 30 some odd years, I was in front of a camera in a stationary position. I never once did runway. Runway is a whole different animal. So I did get into New York Fashion Week, and my manager called me and she said, okay, so-and-so hired you. This brand hired you. I had like 3 or 4 shows the first time. And I was like, oh no, I have no idea how to walk. I have no idea how to walk in a runway. And it was
I
right.
wanted to have a clue how to walk. Honestly, when you think about walking for people, it gets weird. So I'm so glad O'Leary is not yet a runway walker.
So I was like, oh boy, I have to really show up. I am now committed to doing this. I better figure out how to do this. So I live in Miami, Florida. So for a month before New York Fashion Week, it's in February. So January 1st, I said I'm going to walk in high 4-inch heels every single day because I need my legs to be trained to walk on the runway. Who knows how long the runway is because they're all different. And my legs have to be in really good shape. I would go to the grocery store in high heels at 7 in the morning to go get groceries. I'm sure people thought I was a hooker. I would go to the gym in high heels. I went everywhere for a month in high heels. And I'm telling you, I got on that runway and I was comfortable and I did my job. So I all of a sudden was a runway model because I figured out how to do it.
So I got a bunch of quotes from you, from your book, from your work that I want us to have you speak directly to. Here we go. I lost my breasts, but I found my worth.
Before I lost my chest to the implants, I had written a book. I gone back to school because I had terrible chemo brain. So I went to Harvard and got my master's degree to fix the chemo brain. I had done all these things that I was really proud of. And then all of a sudden I lost my chest and I was like, okay, how can I use this to help other people? How can I use the pain I'm in with this situation? I was like, okay, going back to modeling. And so although I did redefine my beauty, right, with losing the implants, I had already kind of redefined my beauty with my first mastectomies, even though I reconstructed my chest. So having 4 mastectomies is quite an unusual thing. But I think I've taken all of the situations in each season of my life and used it in different ways to be a vine instead of a victim.
Mm. Pain is real, but so is hope, and hope is stronger.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know if you live in chronic pain after your accident, but I live in chronic pain. I mean, every single moment of every single day, even in the middle of the night, it wakes me up. And it is hard. Grind my teeth and it's brutal. And I take no medication. I already have liver damage from the chemo. But the pain is real, like you said, and it's palpable. But hope is bigger.
Mm. Illness or tragedy does not just happen to a person, you say, it happens to their family. I believe talking about that helps others feel less alone in their traumas.
Well, it's interesting because so many people say, well, breast cancer happened to you. And I said, no, it really did happen, it impacted everybody around me. And they gave up so much. And you don't want to dismiss that. Even my ex-husband, he got no glory for all that he did, and he should have. He was kind of left behind because my friends were all taking care of me and encouraging me. And here he was like providing for the family and being super dad and visiting our son in boarding school. And it was like he was kind of a shadow, and that's not fair. Right. And so I just want to make sure that people know who are the caretakers. They're immeasurable in the care. They're immeasurable in that person's life, and they're affected. Everything changes for them as well.
Tell me about the film.
Well, speaking of, my film is, for me, is a bigger platform to give hope. I believe that when people are diagnosed or have an illness or go through trauma, they seek other information other than medical information, right? You are given so much medical information. Sometimes you can't even hear it. Right. I have listened to so many doctors in my life give me information, and sometimes I can't hear it anymore. But what I did was I would search online for stories about what I was about to go through. And so when I was diagnosed with breast cancer and feeling hopeless, I turned to film and I watched Terms of Endearment and Stepmother and Beaches. And every single one of the films that I saw ended in a funeral. And that did not help my condition at all. And so I thought to myself, not in those days, but months after, I thought, you know what? I'm going to write a book about how women show up for each other. I'm going to write a book about my transformation. Maybe that will help people. And I thought one day, you know what? What if I could actually get my book made into a film? Wouldn't that make a splash in the world? Wouldn't there be a space for that? Wouldn't there be a space for survivorship? And ultimately, through the years, I made that happen with a lot of people's help. We have a movie called Hello, Beautiful, We are showing survivorship. We are showing a beautiful, but also very painful story about what people go through during chemotherapy. But it doesn't end in a funeral. And we're also showing what beauty looks like from the inside in this.
Mm.
And so I hope that this film lands all over the world. So it replaces some of the negativity that comes with the movies that have been about cancer. And I've learned through my own cancer and my own trials that for every story of pain and tragedy we hear, we need 10 stories of hope. So I'm hoping that people play this over and over and over and over to remind themselves that people survive.
Christine, where can folks learn more about your work or that film?
Well, they can find me on social media under my name, Christine Handy, and my website is Christine Handy as well. The movie is called Hello, Beautiful, and the book is called Walk Beside Me. The movie is not out yet. We have not gotten a distributor yet, but it's been in some film festivals and we've won some awards. So we're on our way.
You are indeed on your way, and I'm looking forward to seeing it myself. You and I have a hot date at a local theater, and I'm bringing my wife to it, so we're looking forward to that. We have 7 questions, Christine, that we guide all of our guests through before we let them go from the Live Inspired podcast. The very first question is, what's been the most impactful book you've ever read?
The Bible.
Is there a book within the Bible that in particularly moved you?
Psalms.
Wow, big one.
They're
I mean, you got to be bold to get through
filled.
Psalms. It takes the better part of a month, but here we go. What's one positive characteristic or one trait that you possessed as a little girl growing up in St. Louis that you wish you exhibited as brilliantly today?
Well, I mean, I think courage at 11 years old to go into the modeling space, but I lost that for a long time.
I think you got it back in spades. If your home caught fire and all living things are out and you have an opportunity of running back into that home outside of Miami and grabbing one thing, what's the one thing you would grab?
Oh gosh, my son Noah's blankie. I have remnants of it.
What's it mean to you?
He used to use it as a pacifier and is green, and I don't have the whole thing, but it reminds me of just a very happy time in my life.
Mm. If you could sit on a bench on a gorgeous day and have a long conversation with anyone living or deceased, who would you like to be next to?
Jesus.
What's the best advice Jesus or some other example to you ever gave you? So the best advice you've ever received is?
Well, I guess I don't even know who said it, but somebody explained to me the difference between a victim and a vine. And I was like, oh gosh, I really need to change this victimhood because it's not serving me at all. And so I believe that story of shifting from being a victim to a vine really transformed my life.
Mm. What advice do you wish you would have received when you were 20?
Well, I wouldn't have listened to anybody's advice, so it wouldn't have mattered.
Not just the truth. Why do we bullhorn to our children and others when they're not going to listen? They've got to learn the hard way so often.
I mean, people say that
But
all
if you did listen, what advice does that girl at SMU need to hear?
work on your self-esteem.
Hmm.
Work on your self-esteem. What is inside of you that matters?
Christine Handy, it has been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like yours to read?
She was so brave.
Christine Handy, model, mother, author, movie star. Thank you for being brave and thank you for being a guest on the Live Inspired podcast.
Thank you for having me.
My friends, that is Christine Handy. My name is John O'Leary, and today is our day. What a gift. Live inspired. Well, my friends, there were so many takeaways from this episode. One of the comments that I wrote down was, yes, pain is strong, undoubtedly, but hope is stronger, and I choose hope. If all of this talk of overcoming pain with hope, of understanding ultimately what real beauty looks like in your life has moved you today, and you want to take the next right step forward in your journey, you want to listen to another podcast that celebrates this in your life, can I encourage you to check out episode number 41 with my friend, Leah Darrow. Leah is an amazing human being. It was an incredible podcast. She also is a supermodel. I know, like O'Leary only hangs out with supermodels these days. Years ago, I recorded this conversation with her, and it was awesome. You'll know why I'm saying that when you check it out at episode number 41, or by cruising with me right now to johnolearyinspires.com/podcast. And in the show notes, we'll have a link that will take you right into Leah Darrow's conversation. My friends, I want to thank you for tuning in to the podcast for this time. And until the next time, my name is John O'Leary, and today is your day. Pain is strong, but hope is stronger. Today's your day. Live inspired.